The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everybody to this 10-minute podcast where I'm going to share with you a few of my thoughts on the impact of recent history of educational reform on my school. To help you understand my role, I will take a few moments to describe the context of my school, as this will help you to understand the nature of my role. I'm a school business manager in a two-form entry primary academy where over 60% of the children have English as an additional language. The eligibility for free school meals is approximately 25%. There are 420 pupils and 80 staff, and other initiatives we are involved in are: we are a lead school for Teaching School Alliance, and we are also a national support school and a provider of school-based initial teacher training known as a SCIT. So as you can imagine, the role and responsibilities are very varied. I joined the school in 2008 as a school business manager, having worked as an accountant in the private sector for nearly 20 years. The first few years were a real learning curve, trying to understand how a local authority maintained school operated, all the various levels of delegation in place, and the government structure, and all of the numerous acronyms that seemed to roll off the tongue for all the other staff. Now, 8 years later, it seems that the organisation that existed then has transformed into a new organisation, and all of the elements of the transformation have been driven by government policy. In fact, the only element that has remained the same, well, on the surface at least, is the teaching and learning of 420 pupils. 8 years ago, this was the core purpose of the business, and today it still is, but it is the systems behind all of the decisions that have changed. For example, the coalition government introduced a new Ofsted inspection framework which intensified the focus on raising standards. This included having a sharper focus on the quality of teaching and the behaviour of pupils. 2 years ago, performance-related pay for all teaching staff was introduced, which meant the teachers were no longer guaranteed a pay rise based on length of service. The new method ensured that rises were awarded based solely on the quality of their teaching. Having worked in the private sector, this seemed to make complete sense to me, but the reaction of the teachers in my school made me realise that this was a major change to them. Central government had decided that those teachers who provided a better quality of teaching to pupils, which in turn generated more of an impact on raising standards in the classroom, should be rewarded more than those who failed to achieve the same level of impact. I think this government initiative still has more impact to be felt as more and more schools convert to academies, and these organisations have the freedom and autonomy to move away from national pay and conditions. So perhaps competition between local academies with regard to levels of pay will help to ensure that those academies who can afford to pay the top salaries and therefore will attract the best quality teachers. This is exactly what happens for companies in the private sector, but it seems strange to me that this could be the way in the future that schools will operate. During my 8 years, some schools have gained greater autonomy, for example through the extension of the Academies programme. In my local area there are now numerous academies, mainly secondary schools, and again I think this is interesting in itself. Why haven't as many primary schools converted to academies as secondaries? Is there almost a two-tier system between secondaries and primaries? Is the skill set the same in each of these organisations? Perhaps academisation has been driven by the senior leaders in each school, and this accounts for the difference. Anyway, my school became an academy, and now we are being encouraged by the DfE to act as an academy sponsor and run local failing schools. Yet again, the organisation never seems to stand still, and all the time government policy is driving our changes. During this period of time, the coalition government reformed the funding systems for schools' revenue and capital funding and introduced the pupil premium to enhance the support for disadvantaged pupils. I work in a school where our pupil premium accounts for a significant amount of funding, and we have had to introduce initiatives to ensure that this funding is targeted specifically at these children. Ofsted now include, during their inspections, an analysis of how effective the school has been in raising the level of achievement for these children. As a school business manager, I have had to introduce systems to monitor what the funding has been spent on, as well as ensure we comply with the regulations by disclosing the information on our school website. But whilst so much publicity has been focused on the pupil premium funding, when I carried out an analysis of our overall funding, it appears to me that we have received new funding known as pupil premium, yet other areas of our funding have been significantly cut. When I look at our general annual grant statement, this is the same as the school budget share for maintained schools. The values and weightings of the deprivation factors have been radically reduced over the years, so it makes me question if schools are in fact better off after the introduction of pupil premium. One point to note here, though, is that it is the local authority schools forum who decide these weightings and not central government. Have you ever looked really closely at these figures for your own school over the last few years? With central government policy making changes like academisation, I wonder if organisations like the Schools Forum have kept pace with the changes at the same rate. I am not sure that primary academies are as fairly represented on the forum, given they are in the minority. I think it is vital that all organisations within the education sector change and evolve at the same pace, otherwise small anomalies will occur. The Government White Paper in 2010 promoted school-to-school support through teaching schools and the extensions of National Leaders of Education, known as NLEs, and Local Leaders of Education, known as LLEs. My head became an NLE, and over the last 6 years we have supported schools in the local area, especially those graded requiring improvement. As a school business manager, this has increased the number of funding streams I have had to account for and added issues as a maintained school that we would not have had to face. For example, the treatment of VAT. As an academy providing school-to-school support, we are, in the eyes of the HMRC, providing a service to a third party and therefore fall within the category of needing to be VAT registered. In turn, the added complication for the school business manager is the concept of partial VAT exemption. I won't go into any details here to say that central government policy has transformed my organisation, which in turn has had a massive impact on the role of the school business manager, and the role I applied for 8 years ago is hardly recognisable these days. Another government initiative was the introduction of Specialist Leaders of Education, known as SLEs. These are roles that middle and senior leaders with expertise in certain key areas and with the capacity to mentor others in education could apply for. They are linked to the introduction of teaching schools, who are then able to deploy them to the schools within their alliance who require that level of expert support. I applied to become an SLE several years ago now, and my specialisms are in school financial management and also conversion to academy status. I have been deployed in several schools for 1 day a week for periods of up to 6 months, helping other school business managers or bursars within their own schools to understand their role and manage the school budgets in the most effective way possible. I wonder if schools graded as requiring improvement also tend to be those schools in financial difficulties. I am not saying the two always go together, but I have found it interesting that the schools I have worked in as an SLE have been in this situation, and I believe this is linked to effective deployment of resources. Schools in this situation tend to struggle to recruit and retain staff, so expensive agency staff are taken on, which has a big impact on a small school's budget. It seems like a vicious circle, so as an SLE, identifying where costs can be saved and efficiencies made has been a real challenge, but one that I have really enjoyed. This is one of the core roles of a school business manager. When I worked in the private sector, I really had no idea of how government educational policy impacted on the day-to-day running of a school as an organisation. I hope that this podcast has been useful to you in regards to helping you think about the recent history of educational reform on your school as an organisation. All school business managers need to understand the latest government white paper issued in 2016 called Educational Excellence Everywhere, as this policy is what will transform your school as an organisation in the coming years. Thank you for listening.